Sometimes dead is better, and this family is going to learn this lesson the hard way. Louis Creed, a doctor from Chicago, relocates his family to Ludlow, Maine, in search of a quieter life. His wife, Rachel, their young daughter, Ellie, and toddler son, Gage, are keen to adapt to their new environment. They're greeted by Judd Crandall, an elderly neighbor whose Maine accent feels like home. A good-hearted soul, Judd helps them settle in, offering warmth and welcome dinners. Upon exploring their new neighborhood, Judd takes them to a small, hidden pet cemetery, a graveyard for pets killed on the busy highway near their house. It's a quaint, almost sacred place where generations of children have buried their loved pets. But, for Louis, the graveyard is a source of unease. It's as if the place knows secrets it won't share. Judd, with an air of foreboding, recounts some of the history of the cemetery and the surrounding woods. He speaks in veiled words, implying there are places beyond it that are better left alone. Louis listens but doesn't fully comprehend the gravity of what Judd might be saying. The woods themselves feel like a menacing character, silently watching, subtly challenging them to venture deeper. Things turn grim when Louis faces death in his job at the university infirmary. A young man named Victor Pascoe is fatally injured and dies despite Louis's attempts to save him. Before he passes, he mutters a warning to Louis about the Pet Sematary, telling him not to go beyond the barrier. This rattles Louis, but he dismisses it as the delirium of a dying man, until he has a vivid, chilling dream that night, guided by Victor. In the dream, Victor leads him beyond the Pet Sematary and warns him not to cross a barrier that lies beyond it. When Louis wakes up to find mud on his bedsheets, the lines between dream and reality blur. Questions flood his mind, warnings ring in his ears, yet he's paralyzed by uncertainty. Ellie's curiosity about death is sparked, forcing Louis and Rachel to face their own fears about mortality. Rachel is haunted by her past, specifically the agonizing death of her sister, Zelda, from a spinal disease. She's terrified of talking to Ellie about death, leaving Louis struggling with the difficult conversations. They're all trapped in their emotional worlds, unable to communicate, slowly isolating themselves. The family is further tested when Church, Ellie's beloved cat, is run over by a truck. Louis is shattered, torn between the urge to protect Ellie from the harshness of death and the reality that they must confront it. Here, Judd steps in with a solution, or so it seems. He leads Louis to bury Church beyond the Pet Sematary, at an ancient Micmac burial ground, a place of power, of things best left undisturbed. Louis buries Church, torn between skepticism and a haunting sense of dread. The next day, Church returns, but altered, his eyes vacant, his behavior disturbingly unnatural. Louis is flooded with regret and suspicion, realizing that he's opened doors he should have left closed. Judd, too, feels a grave mistake has been made, something irreversible that threatens to consume them all. The ominous return of Church the cat has not only disturbed Louis, but also sowed the seeds of discontent in his family. Ellie senses that something is fundamentally wrong with her beloved pet. The animosity from the newly resurrected Church ripples through the household, affecting even toddler Gage. Rachel's fears about death intensify, as she starts having nightmares about her deceased sister, Zelda. She becomes increasingly restless and unable to communicate openly with Louis. Ellie starts talking in her sleep, rambling about Church, and asking unsettling questions about death and dying. The nightmares are getting to her too. The line between sleep and wakefulness thins, and both Louis and Rachel find themselves caught in a web of dreams that seem to be warning them. About what? They're not sure. Louis' skepticism is put to the test when he is again visited by the spirit of Victor Pascoe. The dreams turn darker, more menacing, forcing him to confront the idea that something terrible is looming. Then, the unthinkable happens. Gage is killed in a horrific accident, struck by a speeding truck on the same perilous road that claimed Church. The family is shattered. Rachel, unable to cope with the loss, takes Ellie to her parents' home in Chicago, leaving Louis alone in their Maine home. Louis is beyond consolation. It's as though every fiber of his being is pulled towards the cursed Micmac burial ground beyond the pet cemetery. Despite the cautionary tales and all the haunting experiences, he is overcome by an irrational urge to bring his son back, just as he did with Church. After all, how bad could it be? Judd senses Louis's intentions but is unable to directly confront him. In a fit of grief-driven insanity, Louis exhumes his son's tiny body and makes his way through the dark, foreboding forest to the Micmac burial ground. The journey is nightmarish, filled with strange noises, shadowy figures, and a palpable sense of evil that fills the air. Ignoring the dire warnings that Victor Pascoe relays in his dreams, Louis buries his son in the accursed ground. After the burial, Louis returns home, exhausted but hopeful. A waiting game begins. Will Gage come back? And if he does, what will he come back as? Louis sits in trepidation, oscillating between hope and horror. Meanwhile, Judd lies awake, overwhelmed by a sense of impending doom, haunted by the fear that they've all gone too far to ever turn back. Louis receives a phone call. It's Rachel, who's overcome by an inexplicable urge to return to Ludlow. She senses something is terribly wrong, but can't put her finger on it. Gage returns, but he's not the angelic toddler Louis once knew. A malevolent force now inhabits his little body, and it wastes no time. Gage, armed with Judd's scalpel, brutally murders Judd, catching him in a vulnerable moment. The horror continues as Gage, imitating the voice of Zelda, taunts and eventually kills Rachel upon her return to Ludlow. Louis is shattered, but resolute. Armed with lethal injections, he goes to Judd's house. After a dreadful confrontation, he manages to administer the injection to Gage, ending the demonic child's brief second life. Despite everything, Louis is still ensnared by the allure of the burial ground. He convinces himself that Rachel will return different, that it was only the wait that turned Gage evil. Ignoring the lessons of all that's happened, he carries Rachel's body to the Micmac ground for a final burial. The story concludes with Rachel's hand falling on Louis's shoulder, her voice uttering a chilling, "Darling." Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can watch more videos like this. Thanks for watching.